If you've been researching and shopping for gemstones, you have most likely come across reference to the Mohs Hardness Scale. Even though this is something that was invented in 1822, it's obviously something that is still widely used throughout the gem industry. There are definitely some misunderstandings when it comes to gemstone hardness in relation to this scale. Here is everything you need to know about the Mohs Hardness Scale. The first thing you should consider is that hardness is not the only thing you should be thinking about when considering a gemstone's durability. As a gemologist, there are actually three factors I consider when considering a gemstone's total durability, and that is hardness, toughness, and stability. Hardness actually only refers to a gemstone's ability to resist scratches and abrasion. When it comes to breaking and chipping, that's actually a gemstone's toughness, and stability refers to how a gemstone resists temperature, light, and chemical reactions. I have a whole video on gemstone toughness versus its hardness, so definitely check that out to learn more. Each gemstone has a very specific chemical composition and crystal structure, and this is what affects all of its characteristics, including hardness. Hardness specifically is very much affected by how strong the chemical bonds are between the atoms in every gemstone. A perfect example of this is diamond. Famously, diamond is composed of 100% carbon atoms. They sometimes have some trace elements mixed in there, but that is really only with colored diamonds, and those trace elements are what is giving it their color. Now, what else is 100% carbon? Pencil lead, and pencil lead is extremely soft. You could crush it with your fingers. So how are these two substances so different? The difference is that diamonds are formed in the Earth's core over millions to sometimes even billions of years. And because of that, their atoms get very, very dense and compacted together. The chemical bonds between those carbon atoms are extremely strong, and that makes diamond the hardest substance on Earth, whereas the 100% carbon pencil lead, made out of the exact same thing, but extremely soft, the complete opposite. The other interesting thing to know is that hardness also very much affects how well a gemstone can take a polish and an overall luster. Very hard gemstones like diamond and corundum, which includes sapphire and ruby, because they have excellent hardness, they can be polished and cut very sharply. They can have very high luster. You get that nice shine, that very crisp appearance. Interestingly enough, a very high polish can also help a gemstone resist scratches more over long periods of time. This is why, for example, if you see a sapphire ring and something that has a gemstone that is a lot softer, like quartz and amethyst, for example, the amethyst doesn't ever get that very kind of reflective, high shine, very sharp finish. We express hardness on the Mohs Hardness Scale from a 1, which represents something very soft, like talc, all the way to 10, which is the hardest, which is diamond. As mentioned, the Mohs Hardness Scale was invented in 1822 by German mineralogist Friedrich Mohs. And one of the other important things to understand about this scale is that it's a relative scale. It is not a uniform scale. So what I mean by this is that when we see charts, for example, with gemstones listed on the Mohs Hardness Scale, it really only represents which gemstones have the ability to scratch the ones rated below them. It doesn't actually define how hard these specific minerals are. So again, the distance between these minerals as far as how hard they are on the scale is not equidistant. So for example, sapphire and ruby, they are rated a 9, whereas diamond, the hardest material on Earth, is rated a 10. We might think on the scale that diamond can only just barely maybe scratch a sapphire, but in fact, diamond is exponentially harder than corundum. It is much harder than any other mineral. Having said that, this makes sapphire, ruby, and diamond excellent choices for engagement rings because of their hardness. It's definitely why sapphire is the most common colored gemstone, I would say, for an engagement ring by far. It's also good to know that corundum also has excellent toughness, so again, overall, it's an excellent gemstone to choose for a ring. You might be wondering why I haven't mentioned moissanite, which does have a hardness of just over 9, I would say, and it's definitely quoted as being a very hard gemstone and an excellent choice for engagement rings. And I really haven't included it here because it is a synthetic gemstone. It can be found naturally, but all the moissanites on the market, especially with engagement ring companies, are all being made in a lab and they are not natural. Moving our way down the scale, we find topaz, emerald, aquamarine, morganite, and spinel. These gems are all rated around between 7.5 to 8.5. This rating makes all of these stones also excellent choices for rings, which is interesting because you may have noticed that emerald is often quoted as being a gem that is too soft for engagement rings. However, this is generally a myth. What you do need to pay attention to with emeralds if you're shopping for engagement rings is if they have very high level of inclusions and if they have surface level inclusions as well. These are things that are more likely to affect the long-term stability of the stone, as well as maybe some very heavy treatment that might not last for a lifetime. It might have to be retreated at some point. But in general, good quality emeralds without surface reaching inclusions are totally fine. At between 7 and 7.5, we find red garnets, Tsavorite garnets, Zircon, Tourmaline, as well as the quartz family, and this includes citrine, amethyst, rose quartz, smoky quartz, etc. In my opinion, this is pretty much the cutoff as far as engagement rings and other jewelry that you think is going to have heavy wear or a lot of daily use. Why do I say this? It's because quartz is actually one of the most prevalent minerals we have here on Earth, and it's so prevalent on Earth that actually most of the dust in the air is made out of quartz. So as you can imagine, anything below this scale can easily be scratched by quartz, even if you just leave it out on your dresser, and it collects even a day or two of dust. If you have a cleaning cloth that you usually use to wipe your jewelry down as well, this cleaning cloth over time is naturally going to get some dust on it, and you will literally be wiping quartz dust onto your jewelry, onto anything that is softer than this, and you really could be creating a lot of little scratches and abrasions over time. So as we move down the scale, you can definitely include these gemstones. A lot of them are very popular and very common. You just have to be extra cognizant of how you wear them, how you store them, and how you clean them. And in addition, I would say the stones below this level are definitely best used in earrings, a necklace, or brooch, or something else that's not going to get easily knocked around. Between 6.5 and 7, we have some very beautiful specialty gemstones. We have Kunzite, Tanzanite, demontoid garnet, and Peridot. You'll also want to note that Jadeite, Nephrite, and Chalcedony are also between around a 6 and a 7, but you're probably thinking, oh, I see those in ring designs all the time, and they're very common in jewelry. And what I'll say about this is that all three of these materials, because they have a microcrystalline structure, they have excellent toughness, as I mentioned at the beginning of the video, and so this kind of tends to make up for their low hardness, and this is why they can be used in jewelry a little bit more. Along these same lines, we find Lapis Lazuli, Turquoise, and Opal, and they are only between around a 5 and a 6, which again, we're getting pretty low here on hardness, but what I will say about these three materials is that they're almost always cut into cabochons. And the interesting thing about the cabochon, because of the dome shape, it really does help protect the stone a little bit more, and it also hides scratches and abrasions very well, much more than in a faceted gemstone. The gemstones that are rated 5 and under on the Mohs Hardness Scale include amber, coral, pearl, malachite, and rhodochrosite. Unsurprisingly, amber, pearl, and coral are all organic gems, and this is a category in gemology that we use because they actually come from living things. So, of course, they don't actually have a normal crystal structure like minerals that are found in the earth. This makes them very vulnerable to scratching and breaking down, very vulnerable to chemicals, as I mentioned earlier as well. They have very low stability, but of course they tend to be very rare. They're very special and unique, and so these are definitely things that you're going to want in your jewelry collection. If you're a collector or a jewelry lover, you just have to make sure that you handle them with the care that they deserve. Thank you so much for watching. I hope I've been able to clear up any misunderstandings about the Mohs Hardness Scale that you might have had. If you do have very soft gemstones like pearls in your collection and you want to know how to store and care for them properly, definitely check out our video on that. If you have any questions, please feel free to put them in the comments below, and be sure to follow us on Instagram at Winston Gems and Jewelry.